Welcome to the Mindset by Design podcast with your host, the expert Andy Murphy, where you will learn the tips, tricks, and strategies he teaches his world-class clients to give you the skills to dominate any business.
What's going on, Mindset by Design crew, and welcome to episode 298. Hope you're amazing, as always. Always going to say, especially, we're so close to episode 300. We're so close. I'm pumped because that's a big milestone in the podcast world, but big milestone in my world. This has been such a ride and an adventure over the past X amount of years. It's beautiful to look back and see the ride, and the amazing people I've met, the minds I've looked into and been inspired by and motivated by. It's changed my life. And hopefully if you're a regular listener, especially if you've been listening for a long time, nearly close to 6 years, you're going to really have gone on this journey with me. And I appreciate you. I really, really do. I really do. That means if you've listened from number one, and I'd love to hear from you if you've listened to the very first episode or the very first couple of episodes, right? Way back when. Because I really don't know how many of you are out there. But guess what? I know there's going to be an original Mindset by Design crew. So I'm pumped about the 300th episode, and I probably should shut up about it. Wait till episode 300, Andy. I get it. And speaking of getting it, today's episode is a little bit different from a few different reasons. I was looking at what episodes to put out today, and obviously there's so many topics that I could have spoke about. And one of the topics that doesn't get spoke about in the entrepreneurial business world is something that is what I call drivers. Drivers are emotional responses that create us to think, feel, and act a certain way, right? Or create a version of us or the world that we see. So that driver can come from many different places. But what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of performers in general, like people on stage, actors, rock stars, all these people, generally it's often coming from damage as a kid, right? So that's what gives them that external motivator, that external validation, right? So that's what creates that passion, that drive, and it's amazing. But there's also a consequence to it, right? There's also a consequence to that damage. And what I wanted to really get into today is a study. And I'm not going to do this start of this long and drawn out because I actually want to speak about the topic today because we've got a really cool article to review. Now, I don't know, and it's an interesting topic. I'm just going to bring it up straight away, right? It's such an interesting topic. I don't have kids. I don't want kids either. I'm good, right? There's lots of people to go and help, including kids. So I don't personally want them, so I'm never going to be a parent. But again, if you're just looking at from a basic psychological and neurological aspect, right, of parenting and how you create behaviors and belief systems in people and how that forms and shapes their health, their view of the world, their success level, their drivers, their motivators, etc. And so what's fascinating is from 0 to 7, that's called the imprint stage. That imprint stage is where it's like the blueprint of your entire life, right? It's like the blueprint, it's the foundation. So imagine if that's rocky, right? Then guess what? Everything that's built on top of that isn't going to be stable and smooth. Does that make sense? So when we can look at things like that, then from a psychological aspect as a parent, shouldn't we be making sure that there is no damage? Right? There shouldn't be damage, should there? And the reason I say that is, as human beings, we're supposed to be evolving and getting better, right? Aren't we? Yeah, we're supposed to be. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we're not supposed to be living in our monkey brain. We're not supposed to be in reaction mode. We're not supposed to be living in a fear response. Of course we're not, right? We're not scared chimpanzees or orangutans, right? We're not. We're supposed to be evolving past that. This is why we have a very different brain, the prefrontal cortex part of our brain, right? It's not dominant in most animals, right? Well, unless you dolphins and things. But when you start to understand the brain, then isn't it interesting that you get all these different characters and you get all these different artists and musicians and incredible people, but they all come from damage. Stand-up comics, right? They all come, entrepreneurs, they all come from damage. So, Andy, is what you're probably asking. So what would happen if we just healed and cleaned up the world? We'd have a really boring world. Yeah, you're right, we would. We'd have a really boring world. But you know what? It'd be way better, right? It'd be way better. So that's what today's about. And speaking of getting better, and today, you need to be doing that too. And there's multiple steps to join basically the FireMind formula, right? FireMind formula is a solution to a massive issue in the entrepreneurial world. Well, for a start, right? I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on masterminds, tens of thousands of dollars on mentoring, tens of thousands of dollars on digital training and courses, right? And I'm sure you spent a lot of money yourself. And they're all great. They're all great. They're all beneficial. But you know what I found? What I found was that if you bought the mastermind, you didn't get access to the mentor. If you bought the digital course, you didn't get access to the mentor, right? Unless you were going to spend a lot of money. And that's fine, right? That's the VIP service. That's what I do with my private clients. It's that high-end service, right? So you get to know me intimately and you get a different level of communication and a different level of relationship with me. So you get higher level results. But besides that, guess what I solved? Well, that problem. The problem is you never get to meet the mentor. You never do unless you're spending tens of thousands of dollars. So what I created was the FireMind formula. Mastermind, mentoring, training at the highest level at a price that a business, an entrepreneur can afford. That's it. So instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars on each one of these a year, why wouldn't you come over and see the alternative? That's it. So that's the FireMind formula. So you can start your journey in the morning and wake up every day and tune up your unconscious mind in the FireMind.me. So FireMind.me means that you can go to the FireMind morning audio. Tune it in, put your headphones in, 15 minutes and you'll be feeling better than you probably have in 20 years. The other way you can go is find out what the FireMind formula actually is. So FireMind.me/apply for FireMind. So apply-for-FireMind. And you can see what it's all about on that page. It'll give you a beautiful description and more importantly, book a time to have a chat and see if it's a right fit for you. If you are an entrepreneur right now and you are advancing, love the brain, love the science, love and know mindset is the missing key, then guess what? It is for you. What else? Well, I want to make sure that you have a brand new community around you, a brand new community of all different types of entrepreneurs from all over the world, all driving forwards with their business. So you have an instant community. And you also have access to what I truly believe is the most premier training of mental performance that exists on earth. NLP, neuroscience, and my view on everything. And guess what? All of that is in the FireMind formula. So you can apply and you might be one of the lucky 50 who get access. So head over to your show notes and you can see all the links, including connecting with me on LinkedIn and in the Facebook group. So here we go. Let's jump into this today and see where it goes. And I'll see you at the end of the show. So crew, here you go. Here we are. So if you're a parent, really pay attention to this. But also, if you're just really harsh in general to your loved ones or people around you, then pay attention, right? Because you really are sculpting their view of the world and how they're going to live. So if you're doing this to other people, you probably find that you're doing it to yourself. So by becoming aware, right, by becoming aware of yourself and others, then guess what? You can create change. So this actual article I'm going to cover today is from neurosciencenews.com, and the title is, Does Harsh Parenting Lead to Smaller Brains? You know, and it's like anything. It's going to go into the article, but smaller brains, obviously, well, that means something's damaged. It's not growing, right? So when we look at things like that, it changes the game. It changes the game because you can see actual brain changes from actual damage. Like, it's even like with head trauma now in football, American football, or martial arts, which is my thing. It's you could see brain damage because they can actually look inside of the brain and actually see the fascia being not connected anymore. So the electrical impulses aren't moving around the right way. That's brain trauma. It can heal, but it depends. So this is the original study before Neuroscience News got hold of it, was prefrontal cortex and amygdala autonomy for youth with persistent levels of harsh parenting practices over subclinical anxiety symptoms over time during childhood by Sabrina Suffren. And it was published on March the 22nd in Development and Psychology. Hey, you got to give people reference, right? You got to give people reference. So, of course, if you're a regular listener, then you're going to know when I do these reviews. One, I'm not the best reader. I have a bit of dyslexia for a start. But besides that, I always give my opinions, and I take it in a different context, and I add a different level and a different view of it and connect it to business. And if we can understand, or to performance, right? And that's what we do. So remember, what my thing is something called neuroconditioning. And neuroconditioning means just like a boxer, right? Or a professional fighter, they get conditioned to the pain. It means they can respond differently. Well, we need the brain the same way. We need the brain to be conditioned, right? To be able to stay focused, stay on point, and be able to drop into flow states and genius states and fire states every single day, right? So that's what I'm going to be sharing as we go through this. So let's take a look at this. Okay, crew. Okay, just take a big deep breath, settle down, and let's go on a little ride, because this is a really emotional topic, right? Because it just is. I come from a little bit of a crazy world, like a lot of people out there, and again, I saw a lot of things you probably shouldn't as a kid. And because of that, you see the world a different way. And it's wild to think back, 19 years ago now, when I first left the UK and went to Sydney in Australia. Obviously, that's where I found NLP and sales, and became the top in Australia, New Zealand, and investment real estate, right? Own my own business, blah, blah, blah. So I'm sure you know my story. So I remember I was 3 days in, and I remember standing outside a hotel. I had all my bags, all my suitcases. They were pinned against the wall behind me. I was standing wide-legged over them, sunglasses on, and just looking left and right, and just clocking or watching everybody. Why? Because I thought they were going to steal my bags. Why? Because the way I grew up, somebody would steal your bag. Someone would distract you and someone would take your bag. And then I realized something as I looked around and saw everybody smiling. Yeah, it was just me. It was just me being like that. But that, again, is from the environment, the way I grew up, etc., etc. So Again, I just want to share with you this study, and hopefully it makes you see things a little bit differently in your own life for yourself, what happened to you, or maybe, or maybe as you as a parent right now. Hopefully this helps. Okay, a quick summary of the actual article. Children whose parents use harsh punishments such as spanking have smaller brain structures during adolescence. The decreased size was most noticeable in the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, in two areas of the brain that are associated with emotional processing and the emergence of depression. So when you look at the summary, right, you can start to understand why now this is an issue, and it's something we've got to address. The original source, University of Montreal. It was conducted by Sabrina Suffren, a PhD from the University of Montreal, and the CHU St. Justine Research Center in partnership with the researchers at Stanford University. So what it was said is the harsh parenting practices covered by the study are common and even considered sociably acceptable by most people in Canada and around the world. Well, I really think that's changed, or changing personally, but maybe we're listening to this, you're listening to this, and I'm saying this, and maybe we're in the minority. I don't know. But the implications go beyond changes in the brain. I think what's important is for parents and society to understand that the frequent use of harsh parenting practices can harm a child's development, says Suffren, the study's leading author. And we're talking about their social and emotional development as well as their brain development. So think about that, right? So the brain's actually changing, but okay, what the heck does that even mean? Well, it means it's not responding as it should. It's not performing as it should. So if it's not performing as it should, then, does this lead to what we're seeing in today's society with today's generation, right? Because we're seeing a lot more depression. That's what's being shown, right? And what would happen if that is because, again, of social media interaction? Because, again, the brain creates a dopamine and chemical addiction to likes, right? To the highs and lows, the responses. So what happens is then a normal person, a kid these days, is on that emotional roller coaster all day. So, again, very easy to start getting an amygdala response, fight or flight or freeze response, right? Or it's very easy to get an emotional problem. Does it make sense? So again, what happens is like I said at the start of the show, the 0 to 7 is the imprint stage, but then we move from 7 to 14. That's the modeling period, or the modeling stage, where they start to look and the brain starts to replicate whatever it is around them most, including music, including movies, including people, right? Including environments. So when we start to look at all of these things, then it starts to make sense why the emotions and brain autonomy is radically changed, which means your view is radically changed, which means you're literally living in a fear, fight, or flight response constantly. And that's messed up. From my side, that's really messed up, because what happens is part of your brain starts to adjust. It's the reticular activating system, the RAS. So it starts to adjust. This is the brain's filter. So because it starts to adjust, it starts to see the world a very certain way. The neurology starts to connect, or the mind muscle starts to connect to reinforce and repeat that pattern, right? And between 14 to 254 days, 18 to 254 days is where habit formation takes place. So over those early stages, what happens very quickly is your view of the world connected to fear, which means reaction, which means stress hormones, which means, you seeing the world a certain way. And guess what? Well, that creates internal damage. It creates a certain structure in the brain, but it also creates limitation in you. It could create lack of self-worth in you. It could create addictive behaviors. Right? So when we start to look at things as a whole, none of that, by the way, was in the article, but when we start to look at everything and the damage that takes place and the effect of it, yeah, we're going to have some boring people, but I think it's going to be a better world. So moving back to the article. Serious child abuse, such as sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, neglect, and even institutionalization, have been linked to anxiety and depression later in life. Well, I've just explained why, right? So, previous studies have already shown that children who have experienced severe abuse have smaller prefrontal cortexes and amygdala. As I said before, two structures that play a key role in emotional regulation and emergence of anxiety and depression. So in this study, researchers observed that the same brain regions were smaller in adolescents who had repeatedly been subjected to harsh parenting practices in childhood, even though the children did not experience more serious acts of abuse. Okay, so back to me. What they're showing in modern day neuroscience and studies is that trauma is trauma, right? It's all about perspective, right? Some trauma, somebody is going to react to a small trauma because it's of its novelty in their life, rather than someone who's been through a lot of things and the same thing happens to them, then they're going to be more desensitized to it, right? So when we start looking at that, it gets a little crazy. Listen, these findings, back to the article, are both significant and new. It's the first time that harsh parenting practices that fall short of serious abuse have been linked to decreased brain structure size, similar to what we see in victims of serious acts of abuse, said Suffren, who completed the work as part of a doctoral thesis at the Department of Psychology under the supervision of Professor Francesco and Franco. She added that a study published in 2019 showed that harsh parenting practices could cause changes in the brain functioning among children. But now we have actual evidence of this effect and the very structure of the children's brain. It's wild, isn't it? You know, and so imagine with orphanages, imagine with homeless kids, imagine, you know what I mean? And then we move into real low socioeconomic environments, and then doesn't matter how low you think your level is of socioeconomic, of your idea of it, there's somewhere else in the world that's literally 1,000 times worse, right? So it's incredible when you hear, to me, it's incredible when you hear these stories of people coming from the most extreme environments and then making a decision to become something extraordinary, you know, a billionaire, or they come from literally the slums and they're a multi-millionaire, or they're running like huge corporations. It's amazing. It's amazing. Or they've just become happy. Do you know what I mean? It's all of this. Now, this is important, this next bit, because this is crazy. They monitored children from birth, right? So look at this. So one of the study's strength is that it's used data from children who have been monitored since birth at the CHU St. Justine in the early 2000s by University of Montreal's Research Unit on Children's Psychosociological Maladjustment. So the monitoring was organized and carried out by GRIP members, Dr. Jean, Dr. Michael, and Dr. Richard. As part of the monitoring, parenting practices and child anxiety levels were evaluated annually while the children were aged between 2 and 9. This data was then used to divide the children into groups based on their exposure, low or high, to persistently harsh parenting practices. So that makes sense? Okay, so monitoring what? You got it. Child anxiety levels, age 2 to 9, 2 different groups, high and low, depending on the parenting practices, okay? So keep in mind that these children were constantly subjected to harsh parenting practices between the ages of 2 and 9. This means that the differences in their brains are linked to repetitive exposure to harsh parenting practices during childhood. So Saffron, who worked with her colleagues to assess the children's anxiety levels and perform MRIs on them between the ages of 12 and 16. So now we're finding out what the effects are. So this study is the first to try to identify the link between harsh parenting practices, children's anxiety, and the autonomy of the brain. So it's basically the end of the article, but let me jump in and talk about that, because whether you've got to understand, right? So what it talks about is trauma. Well, I spoke about trauma, but let's talk about micro traumas. There's micro traumas, depending on what evidence is you can have as an adult, between like 300 and 400 micro traumas. Micro little pinpricks of damage. So what that means is that they're coming from somewhere, right? People don't get messed up by themselves. People get messed up by other people. So pay attention to how you are interacting with yourself, because how you are interacting with yourself is more than likely how you're interacting with other people, okay? Even if it's on a deep unconscious level. Because you might be overly nice to people, but under it, you're really doing patterns of self-destruction to be nice, okay? So whether it's mentally, verbally, visually, energetically, what happens is you can create abuse. You can abuse yourself, you can abuse other people, and you can damage kids. Now, as I said before, right, the goal is to have a world of boring people, right? Because there's no damage. But what we need to stop is the replication of that damage. Because what's the old saying? You got it. Hurt people, right? And we don't want that. So if we could stop this today, imagine how the world would change tomorrow. Think about that. So that's a little bit of a randomness, because it's not to do with business, but it is to do with business, right? Because I want you to look inside yourself and understand, where are the drivers? What's the emotional driver that's pulling you towards the next stage? Is it a fear from the past that you have to, right? And that's what's driving you forwards. It's fine for a while. But if you keep putting your hand on the fire, you're going to keep getting burnt. And that burn is going to turn into a scar. And that scar is going to turn into a wound. And that wound is something you will focus on. What we want to be able to do is tune your whole brain to only see angles, perspectives, winning, confidence, drive, right? The way you, infinite amounts of money, seeing a completely expanded, infinite view of your possibility and potential. That's what we want to be seeing, right? So when we understand that, if you're looking inside yourself and changing the driver or the emotional source that's fueling you to move forwards in your business and life, then as long as it's coming from the right place, beautiful, we can tune it. If it's not coming from the right place, it's okay. That's what I do. We can tune it. But either way, you're a high-performance vehicle, and that high-performance machine needs fine-tuning. So that's it. So crew, we're going to wrap it up there. So that's the end of episode 298. Hope you got something from that. I really hope you liked it. I really hope you share this. And if you're a parent, I really hope you got something from this, right? And if you are not a parent and you're a kid listening to this, and your parents might be old, you might be relating to how you grew up through this, right? But either way, make sure you head over to those show notes. Let's hit the next level, hey? Let's do this. Let's make moving from 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8 figures absolutely smooth by making sure your brain and your nervous system is bulletproof through neuroconditioning. So jump into the FireMind. The link, well, you know the links by now. Head over to Andy Murphy Mindset on Facebook and you will find the group. Come and hang out. I'm doing loads of training starting from next week, so you want to be in it. What else? Make sure you go into FireMind.me, downloading your audio to switch on your unconscious mind every morning and to think, feel, and act like a rock star. What else? You've got to be in the FireMind formula. If you are right now looking for a new high-level community, or if you right now are obsessed with growth, if you right now want to be part of Mastermind mentoring and training at the highest level from people who have worked with NBC stars, world champions, billionaires, royalty, and if you want to learn from them, by the way, that's me, then you need to go to firemind.me/apply for FireMind. Apply-for-FireMind, or hit the show notes. But either way, find me on LinkedIn, find me in Facebook, otherwise, find me somewhere. Until then, you have an amazing, amazing day. Much, much love. And, oh yeah, one more thing. Why don't you smile for me?
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy. We'll catch you next time.